Hi, I'm Kiral. I'm a transmedia artist, and here's a video series about the story behind my sculpture called Finesse. So this series is divided into 4 parts. So the first part is about the context and concept of the sculpture, so why I wanted to create it. But if you don't like the blah blah, you can skip to part 2 if you prefer some satisfying creation action. Because in part 2 I'm talking about the sketch of the sculpture and how I went from the sketch to creating the structure of the sculpture. And then in part 3 I'm diving into what makes the sculpture quite special, which is the scent. That's right, so the sculpture is supposed to smell. It's an olfactory sculpture. So go to part 3 for that. Then in the 4th part, the final part, I am bringing all of this together and I'm adding textile and paint to the sculpture. I'm stuffing it with the scent and I'm doing the grand reveal, as well as some concluding thoughts. Hi there. So what if I told you that my latest sculpture is dressed in my own memories, smells like the concept of memories itself, bears the name of an Argentinian legend of literature, and is an analog rendition of a 3D model I used in another installation. And I'm still not sure if I kind of hate it or kind of like it. So here's the story of Finesse. It's a convoluted ride. So who is Finesse? So Finesse, that's a character composed of like a pile of traces of memories that is almost paralyzing him. And he's a reference to Finesse el Memorioso, which is a short story from Jorge Luis Borges from Borges, published in 1942, and which is centered on Ireneo Finesse, who loses the capacity of forgetting after an accident, and in consequence of that he cannot forget anything, but he can also not think. It's impossible for him to think because his head is full of memories. Okay, but why did I want to work with a name referencing this story? Well, see, my Finesse has an origin story which is connected to the project Self-Portrait. So Self-Portrait, that's an installation on memory and transhumanism that I created a few years ago, and it contains basically a world, or like a digital world, where all its inhabitants and passers-by get rich or richer the more people pay attention to the memories they hold. And Finesse is one of these inhabitants. So the installation operates only through eye tracking. So with your eyes you can pay attention literally to memories, and the amount of attention you give to memories is going to enrich one of the characters in the digital world. And I will eventually make a whole video about this project because this story is already convoluted enough and I just don't want to lose you. But stay with me. So long story short, all the inhabitants of this digital world represent something connected to memory. And Finesse is that metaphor for this transhumanist ambition of being able to download the content of a brain onto a computer, including its memory, and so being able to technically hold on to memories forever, and so to never forget anything. But I wanted to bring a twist to that story and contextualize it with the story of Finesse from Borges, which is a cautionary tale, and like highlight some sort of connection between thinking and memory. There is actually a link that exists between the capacity of reflecting and memory and thinking in natural sciences, but I'm not gonna get into that now. In other words, Finesse kind of symbolizes the necessity to forget. Anatomy of Finesse. Why does Finesse look the way he does? So here is a breakdown of the anatomy of my Finesse. So Finesse is dressed up in memories, basically. So what do I mean by that? So I have produced images of my own memories with like digital and analog means. So I have made like collage of what I could remember from my memories, and that included visual cues but also sound and text messages that I've downloaded from databases. Like I really tried to have like a 3-dimensional trace of some of my memories. And then I also trained an algorithm to produce simulations of my own memories. So that means that I fed a database visual images from my childhood and teenage years and excerpts of my writings and all of that. And then I trained this generative algorithm to learn to recognize patterns in these memories and then try to create new real fake memories of mine. And these images are at the heart of this self-portrait installation I've already mentioned. It's the pieces of memories that people can observe and that will enrich the characters. But it is also what Funès is dressed up with, and by the way, it became a project of its own called Kai Memoria, and that's the project for which I'm making all of these textile prints tests like this one in the background. So basically, Funès is dressed up with a mushy, patchy assembly of traces of natural, autobiographical and artificial memories. So Funès was a sketch I conceived, and then it was 3D modeled by a gaming company with which I worked on self-portraits. So I had a 3D model, and now I wanted to make a real-life sculpture, like an analog sculpture of Funès. But Funès is all about memories, right? So I wondered, how can I add this dimension of memories in real life, like beyond the visual aspect of Funès, who's dressed up in memories. So how do I add the dimension of memory? And what if my sculpture could connect its audience to their own memories? What if it had that power to trigger memories while being a sculpture about memories? That would be quite powerful, right? So is there a medium I can work with that has the power to trigger memories? And the answer is yes. Smells. See, there is a very intrinsic link between the sense of olfaction and memories, and that is due to some physical connections between the olfactory receptors at the back of your nose and then the part of your brain responsible for remembering things. And by the way, the first time you encounter a smell, you will forever associate the smell to the context in which you smelled it. And that's why when we smell a perfume, sometimes we have very strong, vivid flashback to childhood or to specific people we've known in the past, because memories are literally like these little train wagons to the past. And by the way, this link between memories and smells has been illustrated very famously in a book called Du côté de chez Swann from Marcel Proust, and he's a legend in French literature. But basically he wrote this book in 1913, and there's this very famous scene in which he's basically dipping a little piece of madeleine, which is this French type of small cake shaped as if it had been baked in a shellfish. And so he's dipping this cake in his tea, and all of a sudden he's transported back to childhood memories. And so he makes the link between taste and memory, except that it's not really the sense of taste he's talking about. Actually, he's talking about the sense of smell, because the sense of taste, it's actually only sensations. So your tongue only detects bitter, sweet, salty, that kind of sensations. But the actual taste, that's the olfactory receptors located at the back of your mouth or nose that are responsible for identifying that taste. So Proust, with his Madeleine iconic moment, he's actually illustrating the power of smells when it comes to memories. And this is like a very famous text in French-speaking countries, to the point where there's the expression, my Madeleine de Proust, my Proust Madeleine. When you designate an object as being your Proust Madeleine, it's like this little object that brings you back great memories. So how can I evoke the audience's own memory, but also how can I evoke the story of Proust in the sculpture? Because that's like a way of addressing this. You guessed it, by making the scent of the Madeleine, by reconstructing in an olfactive way this text. So in other words, I want to translate this text into a scent. And then I will put that olfactory translation, that smell, inside the sculpture that I will pierce with little holes, and then the scent will whiff out of the sculpture. And of course the scent will disappear over time, but that's acting also as a metaphor for the fragility of our own memories and how they disappear over time. So it's a very mega meta project with a character representing various aspects of memory. So there's the idea of autobiographical and artificial memory, but there's also my own memories that are reflected in the project through the textile, or like the images. And then there is the memory of the public, of the receptor, which is evoked through the smell. Then there is the concept of memory itself, which is evoked by the smell as well, for those who have the reference to Proust. But even if you don't know about Proust, you will smell a Madeleine dipped in tea, and that will inevitably evoke some sort of memory. Even if you've never smelled a Madeleine in your life before, you might associate it with another type of cake, like some feelings, etc. So I thought, okay, this will take maximum a month, no big deal. It took at least 3 months, not full time of course, but I had so many issues with the scent. So I'll dive into this a bit later. I'll talk about what were the issues and how I fixed them. Okay, so that's it for the lengthy introduction to the project. In the next video, I'll talk about how I went from the technical sketch of the sculpture to building its structure. Okay, bye!